Let's talk about barking. If you have a dog or know of one that barks a lot, it can be easy to see it as a single problem. But dogs bark for a variety of reasons, so you're going to have to dig a little bit deeper if you're trying to get down to the bottom of why your neighbor's dog is so talkative. First, some questions. When and where is the barking happening? Why is it happening? What's the trigger? What's reinforcing the barking? And what does the dog get out of it? Once you have identified the motivation for your dog's barking, you can determine whether it is directly treatable or symptomatic of other issues, and then develop and implement a plan to minimize your dog's need and opportunity to bark. Now, a disclaimer. Dog barking is a perfectly normal behavior. When your dog barks, it's usually for a good reason. So please, don't ignore the barking. Now for the most common reasons dogs bark. Number 1, to alert. This is when the dog will alert something has entered their periphery. Alert barking is a behavior we have spent centuries selectively breeding for. Dogs will often alert bark when they tree a squirrel or see the postman approaching. And from the dog's perspective, this behavior really works. The trigger eventually leaves. A great group sport. If you live in a multi-dog household, you may notice that one dog can set the other off. It can also serve as an alarm. It's how your dog tells you they've decided something is a threat and they need an adult. At times, your dog may overestimate what constitutes an emergency, but other times, they've cornered a poisonous snake or the house is on. Alert barking can be exacerbated by a lack of exercise and mental stimulation, but ultimately, it is good. It is only when it is in excess that it can pose a problem. Diagnosis: directly treatable. Number 2. Barrier frustration. Barrier frustration can look a lot like alert barking, but it is often a symptom of a larger issue. If the barking is focused primarily around barriers like fences or when on leash, if you notice your dog baring their teeth, snarling, or demonstrating an abnormal level of arousal, then they may be experiencing some barrier frustration. So does your dog's barking occur primarily when there is a barrier, like a fence, on leash, or when they're in the car? And how much does your dog bark when there is no barrier present? If the answer is yes to one or all three of those contexts, and your dog does not bark much of the rest of the time, then your dog likely barks out of barrier frustration. The leash reactivity video that I have pinned to my page will help you get down to the bottom of whether your dog's barrier frustration is fear-based or frustration-based. The diagnosis for barrier frustration is going to be symptomatic of something else. Number 3, understimulation. The following videos are examples of dogs barking because they are excited, because I simply do not have videos of dogs barking because they are understimulated. And although excitable barking can be improved with an increase in stimulation, some dogs are just talkers. Like terriers and herding breeds are particularly unafraid to speak their truth. In this segment, we'll be focusing on understimulation barking that is fueled by boredom or frustration at long periods of being alone without any activities to engage in. Understimulation barking is often found in conjunction with digging and chewing problems. Some questions to ask yourself if you suspect that your dog's barking is a result of understimulation. Do they bark as much when you are home? What kind of exercise does your dog get on a regular basis? How often and for how long? What types of chews and toys does your dog enjoy, and how often do they enjoy them? By addressing the underlying frustration or boredom with things like exercise, mental stimulation toys and games, a dog walker and or daycare, you will be able to reduce your dog's understimulation barking. Diagnosis: symptomatic of something else. Number 4, attention barking. Attention and or demand barking often starts as a little grumble or a and quickly develops into insistent and or loud barking, demanding, "Give it to me now," whatever it may be. This type of barking is often unknowingly reinforced by the owners, and it can be really hard to break the habit of reinforcing it. Because the way to address demand barking is to ignore it completely, it can be prone to extinction bursts, a time where the barking gets much worse right before it gets better. If at this moment you succumb to your dog's more intense and persistent barking, they're likely going to be more intense and persistent the next time they want something. If, however, you stick it out and ignore your dog's barking, you're well on your way to having a quieter household. The truth is, you just have to be more persistent than your dog. One question to ask yourself if you suspect your dog is a demand barker is, what are they focused on when they're barking? Is it you, a toy, a door, a bag of treats? If so, then your dog may be demand barking. Diagnosis: directly treatable. Number 5, separation anxiety. Similar to understimulation barking, I do not have video examples to provide for separation anxiety barking. If you suspect separation anxiety is the cause of your dog's barking, here are some questions to ask yourself. Does your dog vocalize excessively when they are alone? Are they destructive and it seems to be focused at the points of exit and entry? Do they soil in the house and usually within the first few minutes after you leave? Do they demonstrate any pre-departure signs of anxiety? Do they self-harm? Or are they unable to eat when you are away from the home? When you return, are their greetings anxious or extended? And finally, is your dog an escape artist? If you answered yes to 2 or more of these questions, then your dog likely has separation anxiety. And as is the case with barrier frustration, if the cause of your dog's barking is separation anxiety, it will have to be addressed first in order to get a reduction in the barking. Diagnosis: symptomatic of something else. These are just some of the most common reasons that dogs bark. It is not an exhaustive list, and your dog will not comfortably fit into a single category, you will often find. It's important to understand and accept that having a dog means dealing with some barking. But if you're looking to reduce your dog's barking, understanding what motivates it is where you begin. Step 1 of any behavior modification program is going to be reducing the dog's need and opportunity to practice the unwanted behavior. To generally reduce a dog's need to bark, you want to first give careful consideration to how much exercise and mental stimulation they get on a daily basis. Meanwhile, management will reduce the dog's opportunities to bark. Things like closing the curtains and setting up a baby gate so your dog does not have access to street-facing windows. Set up a white noise machine or leave the TV on to muffle the sounds that set your dog off. If your dog is barking because they are understimulated, the solution is pretty simple. You can just bring them inside. Once inside, ensure the environment is enriching by giving your dog plenty of interactive toys and chews, and use crates, gates, pens, and even doggy daycare to keep them out of trouble until they've earned their house privileges. For attention barkers, you'll have to come up with some strategies for yourself, like how you're going to respond the next time your dog is demanding that you throw the ball, open the door, or give them a treat. In some cases, you may want to catch your dog before they begin demand barking. So for example, if they like to bark every time you get on a phone call, set your dog up with an interactive toy and or a stuffed Kong before you jump on the phone. If your dog has already started in on their attention barking, then simply ignore them. Put the treats up, set the ball down, pretend like they've disappeared. Remember, the more your dog practices the unwanted barking behavior, then the more often it is being reinforced and the harder it will be to modify it. By simply identifying what's motivating your dog's barking and implementing some management strategies, you'll be well on your way to having a quieter home.